Well guys, I just finished watching season 1 of the Witcher Netflix show, and I thought it'd be good just to share my thoughts and opinion on the show as a whole, as I know a lot of people want to hear exactly what I think now I have finished the full series. But before I get into a full review, I just want to say something for those of you that might not agree with me and might even be angry with me over my opinion. I understand what it's like when you really like something and someone else points out the flaws that they see in it. Sometimes you can feel as if because you like it, they're simply nitpicking and trying to find anything that they can that's wrong with the thing you like. You might feel like they are purposely ignoring any good in it, and that by them disliking the show, they are trying to influence your opinion, influence other people's opinions, or maybe they're just trying to attack you for your opinion and tell you your love for that thing is wrong. I just want to say that that's not something I have any interest in doing. I absolutely hate being the guy that ruins others' fun out of spite, because I believe people shouldn't like the things I don't like. If you love the show, think it represents The Witcher in a truthful and accurate way, or hell, even if you just enjoyed watching it, I have nothing but respect for you. People are going to say that what I'm doing right now is damage control, but honestly guys, I just wanted to say this as I really do empathize, and I know it sucks when someone dislikes the thing you like and then shares their opinion. It just can make you feel a bit bad sometimes, so I do empathize completely. But anyway, now I've addressed that, I just want to say, if you love the show, don't want to hear a word against it, and know if you do, it's just going to upset you or annoy you, I'd click off now, because I'm going to be very truthful about my opinion, as I feel like that's the best way to just do this review. Right. To begin, I'm just going to be blunt. I'm not a fan of the show. Now before you go crazy, I don't think this is actually a bad show. I think it has everything in it that makes up a fantasy TV show, and I can totally see why so many people seem to like it. I think my issues with the show come from me having read the books, and not only that, but having lived and breathed The Witcher for the past 2 years of my life. I've been a fan for a long time, but these past 2 years, this channel has literally been my job, and every week I've made a video on the lore of this world, requiring me to go back over the Witcher books, as well as just general Witcher information. I've also played the games every week for the past 2 years, through doing the playthrough and just through having to record gameplay for the videos. So yeah, I spend a lot of my time thinking about and being involved in this universe. What this means is everything they change or do differently in the show is something I'm acutely aware of and find it very difficult to just ignore, and they have made some major changes from the books. But before I discuss the major changes, I'd like to talk about what I thought was well done in the show, as I want to give credit where credit is due. To begin, I like the scenes with Geralt and Dandelion, or Jaskier as he's known in the show in the original Polish books. I think they played off each other pretty well, and I think their relationship, as it was at that point in the books, was presented pretty accurately. I mean, Dandelion on the whole was just pretty entertaining whenever he was on screen. Whenever a scene with him came up, I knew it was just going to be a bit of fun. I think Henry Cavill did a pretty good job as Geralt. I thought he was alright, didn't think he was perfect, but I mainly put that down to the fact I have an idea of what Geralt is like, how he looks, etc. And by the way, my view of Geralt in the books is not identical to the games, and just in general, it would be very hard for an actor to achieve what I think of as Geralt in my mind. I'm always up for fresh interpretations, but I feel like it was fairly similar to the Geralt we know, but it just didn't quite hit the mark for me. However, I do think as an actor, he played Geralt. And when I saw him, it didn't feel weird. I thought, yeah, I can see Geralt, which I didn't have with all the cast. I liked most of the Geralt fight scenes. Pretty much every fight scene involving Geralt was good. Obviously, we have the Renfri fight, but we also have the Striga fight and the fight in episode 8. They do certainly show a Witcher's skill in combat, which is always just cool to see on screen. I liked the actress playing Ciri, although I do think she is a bit old, and it makes the father-daughter relationship with Geralt feel not quite as intimate. To give you an idea, she's about as old now as Ciri was at the end of the books, and we're only at the start. But I do think she played Ciri well, and I liked how Parvetta and her shared some visual similarities. Now I'm going to move on to the things that they changed, and personally, I just wasn't really a big fan of. So for the first one, pretty much everything with Yennefer, par her scenes involving Geralt, was invented for the show based on comments made by Yennefer and other characters throughout the books. And even then, a lot was simply made up. I'm talking everything, guys. All the scenes in Aretuza simply don't happen. At least we were never shown them happening. The Battle of Sodden at the end was never shown, just talked about, and just everything involving Yennefer by herself without Geralt was invented by the show. Or all the scenes were embellished massively from offhand comments made throughout the book. As Yennefer's a bit more mysterious in the books, and it's less like, okay, here's everything about Yennefer from start to finish. A lot of the things about her are implied, she's a bit more mysterious, and personally I think that makes her seem a lot more strong, as it doesn't really matter where she came from, all that matters is what she's like now. It's similar to Geralt in that way, we don't really find out that much about what he was like before he was a Witcher, but obviously they changed that in the show as well. I do understand that they wanted to present her as a main character on the same level as Geralt, but for me, the books were always about Ciri and Geralt, and occasionally there were some short bits with other characters like Yennefer. In the earlier short stories, which Season 1 is about, the focus was pretty much entirely on Geralt in the books. There were stories involving the other characters, but Geralt was always there throughout and had a major role in all of it. Number 2, in the show, Nilfgaard was thought of as this kind of weak kingdom for some reason, prior to the invasion of Sintra, and it only developed in power apparently due to Fringilla being posted there. This is also just wrong. In the books, Fringilla did not train at Aretuza, she is from the Empire of Nilfgaard, and even during the time of the Usurper, Nilfgaard wasn't this backwater place. I think they literally describe it as a backwater place. It still had its own culture and was still fairly powerful. Nilfgaard is also portrayed as this sort of strange nation that uses forbidden magic to achieve their goals. This is also just incorrect. Nilfgaard is not evil in the books. They did use magic at the Battle of Sodden Hill, but they didn't use people's life force to turn them into balls and then catapult them at the enemy. That is just ridiculous. They're just another nation invading the Northern Kingdoms. The books don't necessarily frame them as this thing that is inherently bad. They are framed as this kind of invading army, and then you can consider that bad in your own personal opinion, but it's never a straight cut as they're literally using forbidden magic and sacrificing people in order to do so. Basically, if you look into it, the Northern Kingdoms are just as bad as Nilfgaard in the books. And if anything, Nilfgaard are actually better in some areas. I mean, as I said, in the show it's very much presented as an us against them sort of situation with Nilfgaard, and they're also being shown as this nation that only achieved its power because of some mage, which is just wrong. Number 3, Ciri's story was very inaccurate. There is a lot that is wrong with Ciri's story, but the main problem is the fact that her entire Brokilon adventure with Geralt was removed. In the books, this story is the first time Geralt and Ciri have a proper conversation and they properly bond, and it's such a significant thing for them in the books because it's basically the beginning of their proper father-daughter relationship. For me, the end scene of episode 8 had very little emotional impact, as the relationship between Ciri and Geralt was just based on the Law of Surprise, whereas in the books, of course the Law of Surprise was a significant thing, but Geralt only really grew to properly care for her after their time in Brokilon. Just like with Yennefer, basically every scene involving her that didn't involve Geralt was not shown to us in the books, and in some cases it was just completely made up. A lot of what happened involving her character was referenced later in the books, but never shown to the extent that it was shown in the show. An exception would be when Cahir is chasing her during the slaughter of Sintra, but even that was portrayed incorrectly. They had Ciri end up in Brokilon after the slaughter of Sintra, which just didn't happen in the books, as did many things. I find it so weird they made this change, and if you actually think about it, Ciri going to Brokilon in the show was just completely pointless. She just left Brokilon to find Geralt, which is what she was doing when she went there. In the books, this was where she met Geralt properly. I mean, it seems to me the entire Doppler subplot and everything there could just be completely removed and nothing would change. Obviously all that stuff just wasn't in the books, and at the end of the season she gets to the point where the story in the books got her to, so it just seems like very unnecessary things to be adding. Number 4, this brings me to one of the worst things in the show, and this is the portrayal of Cahir. Now, I've heard a lot of people say that early on in the Witcher books he was thought to be this evil figure, at least from Ciri's point of view. And whilst this is true, I feel like whoever argues this is purposely ignoring key details in order to put up a fairly shoddy defense of this character's portrayal in the show. First of all, early on in the books, Cahir was not really explained or showed in all that much detail. He was like a figment of Ciri's nightmares, meaning he was real, but in the mind of Ciri, a scared child, he became one of her fears. In the show, we actually see him walking around, interacting with people, taking part in battles he didn't in the books, and he is always presented as this evil guy. die, just from his actions alone. I know a lot of people are saying that it's only season 1 and they're going to change his whole character in the later seasons and stuff, but the way I see it, just based on what he's done so far, it feels so out of character from the Cahir we know in the books that it's just so weird to me already. Number 5. The next point I want to make is that most of the stories that are shown in the show are simply being told incorrectly. To list a couple, there's the portrayal of Foltest in the Striga story, and from this image, need I say more? There's also the Golden Dragon story, where Borch was portrayed as an old man for some reason. Ike of Denel was killed early on. Borch as a Golden Dragon didn't really show his chivalrous side by challenging people to duels as a Golden Dragon. He just got Geralt and Yen to start fighting and killing everyone almost immediately after revealing himself to be a Golden Dragon. In the books, there was proper interactions between all the groups of the characters, and it was just way more developed. I mean, it feels like they've just removed development almost entirely, and you can say, well, you know, they only had 8 episodes, etc., but then we have all this random stuff with Yennefer that just was not needed for her character. I mean, look guys, I could sit here all day saying everything that was wrong with each story, but it would just be pointless. I understand that they can't stick to the script of each story exactly, as this is an adaptation, but for me the problem lies in the fact that they made so many unnecessary changes. I've only really covered the tip of the iceberg here. I mean, just to name a couple more, they changed the way magic works, making it some sort of strange equivalent exchange thing with life, whereas in the books, May just tap into sources and channel that power to use magic. I mean, I can't imagine how they're going to do the Korath desert thing, because theoretically, when Ciri's in the desert and she has to use magic, she could just pick up some random shrub and start using it, whereas in the book she had to search for sources in the ground. It was an entire thing, and I don't see how it's going to work unless they just make major changes, which will sort of mess with the established world they're trying to make with this show, and therefore that entire desert thing is just kind of pointless. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, I won't get into it, as it is spoiler territory for later on, but I haven't really said anything important, so don't worry. They also invented characters like the elf with Ciri, the girl guiding Geralt in Blaviken. They also just changed so many characters' stories. I talked about main characters and some relatively minor characters like Fringilla, but also I could use Stregobor as an example, as he was given a much bigger role. They changed Vilgefortz's story, and despite adding all this stuff, they also just removed a lot of stuff that they could have brought from the source material. So honestly, I'm just really confused about whatever the writer was thinking when they were making it. I know a lot of my mentions towards the end there may come across as nitpicks, but the reason I mention them is just to give you an idea of a fraction of the things they changed. I'm telling you guys, if you wanted me to make a very nitpicky video, I could. I'm just saying the basic things here, guys. At least that's what I'm trying to do. I mean, another thing I've just thought about Cahir is that he actually beat Vilgefortz in a fight, which if you've read the books is just absolutely ridiculous. I mean, Geralt couldn't beat Vilgefortz in a fight without the assistance of magic, so we're saying that Cahir is just the best? I just don't understand what they're doing with Cahir, guys. It's so confusing. But anyway, after saying all of those issues, my initial point still stands. I think, as a fantasy show, I can understand why people who haven't read the books, and people who are not too familiar with the lore, enjoy it. I imagine most people watching it came from the games, and maybe just think, a cool bunch of stories involving Geralt, Yennefer and Ciri, that I've never really known about. This is awesome. And people watching it who've never experienced The Witcher will probably just think, a nice new fantasy TV show that has a decent budget. This is pretty cool. But for me, as someone who is invested in the lore of this world and the characters, i.e. discussing it is literally my job, I can't bring myself to enjoy it. Everything is so different, all the characters' journeys have been changed with the exception of Geralt, but even then, the journey we see him go on in this series is pretty different to his journey in the books. I mean, I mentioned earlier about how we see Geralt when he's younger, sitting in a cart, talking to his mum, being kind of annoying. And we just don't need to know this for Geralt's character. It's just very unnecessary information that feels like it's kind of just there to build drama between him and his mother that just wasn't really there. The books did a good job of explaining this is Geralt's mum, they have a brief interaction, and that's it. It doesn't need to be this very dramatic, Geralt's thinking about his childhood. I just disagree with it, guys. In my last video, I did see a few comments telling me I'm nitpicking, that I need to change my attitude and should just be more positive about it, and to that, I say that I am allowed to dislike something, just as you're allowed to like it. And I also want to say that I don't think anybody is wrong for liking this show. You have every right to like it, and that goes for everyone. There is plenty to like in this show. It's just for me, as someone that knows the books and knows the stories, it just doesn't feel like The Witcher. And that's my problem with it. So with saying that, don't let my opinion become yours if you like the show. I encourage you to just have your own thoughts on the show, and I really like that everyone has different opinions on it. Read the books, play the games, watch the show, and then decide for yourself if you think it's good or not. Personally, I don't like it, but if you do, that's fine. For people who haven't read the books and are wondering if this show will act as a good supplement for knowing some of Geralt's backstory before entering the games, or if you've played the games and you just want to know Geralt and the other characters' backstories, I would personally not recommend this show for that purpose. My main reason for this is because although a lot of information about Geralt is told to us in this show, it is fairly accurate and truthful. The show as a whole is also full of misinformation surrounding the Witcher lore that I think would put you in a bad position if you want to understand the Witcher games to the fullest extent. For example, if you believe that at Aretuza they turn sorceresses into eels and then throw them in a pool, you would just be completely wrong in regards to the game and book lore. Basically what I'm saying is it's better to know nothing than half-truths. For example, imagine seeing Nilfgaard in the show. They use forbidden magic, and we are told they were a backwater place before Fringilla arrived. And also now I think about it, it's heavily implied that Yennefer would have basically screwed up Nilfgaard and kept it as this horrible place, and I just think that is so bad for Yennefer's character, because she would have done a good job. Yennefer is completely competent. I do not understand what they're trying to say about all these characters in the show. It is so weird for me as someone who knows the lore. But anyway, thinking about the whole backwater Fringilla thing, imagine when you meet Emir in The Witcher 3, you would have such a different opinion of him, which is based on something that is not true in regards to the game and book universe. The same applies for you when you meet Fringilla in the games too. So that whole bit there was just for people that play the games. Obviously, if you just want to watch the show and have it as a separate thing, that's fine, as I said, no problem there. Just for people that want to play the games and understand the world, the show is not really a way to do that. So games aside, would I recommend watching this show? I guess, if you're interested in fantasy. I think it's better to watch it yourself and form your own opinion if you're interested in watching the show. I didn't like it, but that doesn't mean you won't, as there is plenty to like about this show. But for me, seeing all the extensive changes at every corner makes it very difficult for me to enjoy it. I know people are going to get annoyed at me. I've had people tell me the games changed some lore and the Lord of the Rings was different to the Lord of the Rings books or something, but for the games, I don't think that's really a relevant point, as they're not adapting the story. They made games as like an alternate universe sequel type thing. It's not canon to the books, but it could be, and if you want it to be canon in your head, it can. I feel like bringing up an argument like that is kind of like, imagine they remade the original Star Wars films, and I said I didn't like them because of the changes they made to the characters. Then someone said, well, you like Luke Skywalker in The Last Jedi, so why don't you like him in the remake? They changed him in The Last Jedi, they changed him in the remake, it's the same thing, right? Well, no, because the remake is based on something that already exists, and the characters were that way in that thing that existed. In sequels, those characters can change, new things can be introduced, but if you're adapting something and then adding a bunch of stuff, it just feels really weird to me. It's a completely pointless point, and just so you know, I didn't like Luke in The Last Jedi, but I think my example illustrates why it's a pointless point to make. As for The Lord of the Rings, all I can say is I think the films are great, and I haven't read the books yet. I really need to, but I've just been so busy for these past 2 years, and it's been on my wish list of things to do. I do actually own a copy, and I literally keep it by my bed every night, but I just never get the time to read it. You know, there's always something else to do. There's always more work to do, always other things to do, always stuff to watch, all the rest. It's just very difficult for me to find the time to read a book that big with how busy I've been, so I'm sorry about that. So to conclude, I didn't enjoy the show, nor did I think it was a truthful adaptation of the source material. I think someone on Twitter actually described it best to me. It's inspired by the original book, not based on it, and for me, that's not The Witcher I love. I think you could use that mindset and say, well, just think of it as something that's completely different and try and enjoy it in that regard. But I just can't do that, because obviously I hear the names Yennefer, I hear Geralt, I hear Ciri, I see places like Aretuza, I hear the names Brokilon, and it's very difficult for me to disconnect the two things. And therefore, all I can see are the changes that I disagree with. But that's it for today's video, guys. Unless there is a significant demand, I'll probably be releasing another Witcher lore video next, or a playthrough part next, but I'm sure I'll talk about the Netflix series in future, so stay tuned for that. I mean, who knows, maybe when Season 2 releases and they adapt some more source material, they'll stick to it a bit more, and I'll actually really enjoy it and then be able to make videos about that. I really appreciate you liking today's video, just to support me. To be honest, guys, making videos like this is always difficult for me, as I really don't like causing causing upset in others. I know that might make me seem a bit sensitive and a bit, but I really don't like to see comments where people are actually upset, and it's not because necessarily that it's offending me or anything, it's just I think, the video I made has made someone feel bad, and I don't like doing that, I like making lore videos that I'm very passionate about and we can just all share in and love. And this is why I haven't covered The Witcher Netflix in so long, because it's just such a hot, contentious topic, and I just don't like upsetting people. But still, having said that, The Witcher is so important to me, so I feel like I have to share my opinion with my community, despite the fact that I know this video is going to get me a very negative response. I'd of course love to see comments responding to what I've said, and please try your best to respond without anger. I know it's hard, but just know I don't dislike you for liking the show, I don't judge you as not a true fan or anything like that. All I think is we have different tastes, but we can still be cool with each other. I'd really appreciate it if anyone new subscribes, as I make Witcher videos every week, and maybe if you're new to the fandom as you've only watched the show, through my channel you can learn more about what made it popular in the first place. Honestly, newcomers, I'd recommend going and playing The Witcher 3 and then getting back to me. Trust me, you'll love it and I reckon you'll have a great time. Be sure to go and follow my Twitter for any updates. I've been talking a lot about The Witcher Netflix on there, so if you just want to hear more about my thoughts and stuff, go and check me out on there and then you can see those. And maybe you guys might want to even make a post about your thoughts involving the show on the Reddit. I'll be looking there every so often, so I might be able to chat with you on there. All posts are welcomed, whether you love the show, hate it, anything else, post what you want. As long as it's actual criticism or just expressing an opinion and not just outright rude, it's obviously going to stay on there, so go and post stuff on there if you want to. And finally, as always, a big thank you to the Patreon pledges. You guys are honestly so awesome, and just thank you all so much. I really appreciate what you all do, and it's just so kind. I'm glad to put all of your names at the end of these videos. Anyway, that's it for today's video, and I'll see you in the next one. Have an awesome rest of the week.